I sat in our living room, clutching my acceptance letter and dorm checklist, heart racing with excitement about starting college in 7 days. Mom and Dad exchanged nervous glances before Dad cleared his throat. "Son, we need to talk about your tuition money." My stomach dropped. "We gave it to Marcus for his business venture. This is your chance to support the family and be the good son we raised you to be." My entire future crumbled in 60 seconds of devastating words. The silence in the room felt suffocating as I processed what they'd just told me. 4 years of college tuition. Gone. Handed over to my older brother Marcus like it was pocket change. "You understand, right, Augustine?" Mom's voice trembled with forced cheerfulness. "Marcus's tech startup is about to take off. He just needs this investment to get to the next level. You've always been so responsible, so mature. We knew you'd want what's best for the family." I stared at them, unable to form words. Dad leaned forward, his expression serious but determined. "Your brother is going to make us all proud, and you'll be part of that success story. Think about it as an investment in our family's future." Something inside me snapped, not into anger, but into clarity. I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram, navigating to Marcus's account. There he was posing next to a cherry red Ferrari designer watch gleaming on his wrist. The caption read, "Another successful day closing deals. Blessed to be living my best life while building the future of technology." But I scrolled down. More photos of Marcus at expensive restaurants wearing what looked like custom suits, standing in front of glass office buildings. The comments were filled with fire emojis and congratulations. But something felt off. I clicked on the location tags. The Ferrari photo was taken at a luxury car dealership. The office building was a generic stock photo location that anyone could access. My heart sank as the truth crystallized. I spent the next 20 minutes diving deeper into Marcus's online presence. The expensive watch appeared in photos for exactly 2 weeks before disappearing. The suits had subtle rental tags visible if you looked carefully. The business meetings were always photographed from angles that never showed other people clearly. Marcus wasn't running a successful tech startup. He was running an elaborate social media performance designed to attract investors to a company that didn't exist. And my parents had fallen for every single post. I stood up slowly, placing my acceptance letter on the coffee table. "I need to pack." "Pack for what?" Mom asked, confusion replacing her earlier confidence. "I'm leaving." Dad's face darkened. "Now hold on, son. Don't be dramatic about this. You can take a gap year, work for a while, save up some money. College will still be there next year." "Will it?" I asked quietly. "Will Marcus's fictional business still need more money next year too? How about the year after that?" "That's enough." Dad's voice carried a warning. "Your brother is family. Family supports family. End of discussion." I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last. My room looked exactly like it had since high school, astronomy posters on the walls, my old telescope in the corner, shelves lined with coding books I'd taught myself from. Everything I'd worked toward for 4 years was supposed to culminate in leaving this room for college dorms next week. Instead, I was leaving for an entirely different reason. I pulled out my old duffel bag and started packing essentials. Clothes, my laptop phone charger, the coding books that had become my constant companions. I left behind the family photos, the high school yearbooks, the childhood memories scattered around the room. Those belonged to a version of myself that believed family meant something different than what I'd just learned downstairs. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, my high school girlfriend who was starting her freshman year at the state university 3 hours north. "One more week. Are you as excited as I am? I can't believe we're finally doing this." I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Plans changed. I'll call you later." By the time I finished packing, the sun was setting outside my window. I could hear my parents talking in hushed, urgent voices downstairs. Probably calling Marcus to tell him about my reaction. Probably strategizing about how to make me see reason. I zipped up the duffel bag and headed downstairs. My parents were sitting at the kitchen table looking like they were preparing for battle. Augustine, sit down. Mom gestured to my usual chair. Let's talk this through like adults. I am talking it through like an adult, I replied, shouldering my bag. Adults don't enable fraud, and they don't steal from one child to fund another child's lies. Those are serious accusations. Dad's voice carried a sharp edge. They're serious facts. I pulled up Marcus's Instagram on my phone and set it on the table. Look at these photos closely. Really look at them. The rental car dealership backgrounds, the stock photo locations, the disappearing expensive items. Marcus isn't running a business. He's running a con, and you just funded it with my future. Mom picked up the phone, scrolling through the images with growing uncertainty. Dad remained stone-faced, but I could see doubt creeping into his expression. Even if that were true, Dad said slowly, Marcus is still your brother, still family. You don't abandon family over money. You're right, I agreed. You don't abandon family over money, but apparently some family members abandon each other for money. The difference is I'm not taking anything that belongs to you. I'm just not staying to watch you throw good money after bad. I headed toward the front door, my parents following close behind. Where will you go? Mom's voice cracked with the first genuine emotion she'd shown since this conversation started. You don't have anywhere to live. You don't have any money. I turned back to face them one last time. I'll figure it out. I always have. Don't be stupid about this, Dad called out as I reached for the door handle. Come back inside. We can work something out. But we couldn't work something out. Not really. Because the problem wasn't the money. The problem was that when it came time to choose between their children's futures, they'd chosen Marcus without even considering what it would cost me. And now that I'd pointed out Marcus's deception, they still weren't apologizing or reconsidering. They were just trying to manage my reaction. I walked out into the twilight air and climbed into my old Honda Civic. The car had 230,000 miles on it, a cracked windshield, and a passenger door that only opened from the outside. But it was mine, bought with money I'd earned working summers at the local hardware store. As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of my parents standing in the doorway, looking confused and frustrated rather than heartbroken. That told me everything I needed to know about whether I'd made the right choice. I spent my first night sleeping in my car at a truck stop 30 miles outside town, using my jacket as a pillow and trying to figure out what came next. The parking lot was filled with big rigs and travelers, all of them on their way to somewhere else, just like me. Tomorrow, I'd start building a different life than the one I'd planned. Tonight, I just tried to sleep and pretend that freedom didn't feel quite so much like loneliness. The first month on my own tested every ounce of resilience I didn't know I possessed. My daily routine became a carefully orchestrated survival strategy. I'd wake up in my car before sunrise, drive to the 24-hour fitness center, where I'd bought the cheapest membership available, shower, grab the complimentary coffee, and head to my job at Murphy's Gas & Go. The gas station sat at the intersection of two county highways, serving a steady stream of truckers, commuters, and late-night travelers. The owner, a gruff man named Pete, had hired me on the spot when I walked in desperate for work. No questions asked about my living situation, just a simple exchange. Show up on time, work hard, get paid. I pulled double shifts whenever possible, working days behind the register and nights stocking shelves and cleaning. The work was honest but exhausting, and the pay barely covered my gym membership, phone bill, and enough food to keep me functioning. Everything else went into a slowly growing savings account that represented hope for a future I couldn't yet envision clearly. The hardest part wasn't the physical discomfort of sleeping in my car or the monotony of gas station work. It was the complete radio silence from my family, broken only by occasional text messages that felt more like demands than expressions of concern. Stop being childish and come home. Your mother is worried sick. Marcus's business is really taking off now. You're missing out on being part of something big. I never responded. What could I say? That I'd been checking Marcus's social media, obsessively watching his increasingly desperate attempts to maintain his facade, that his posts had become less frequent, and more obviously staged. That the comments were starting to include questions from supposed investors, asking for office addresses and meeting schedules. My own social media had gone dark. Sarah called less frequently as she got absorbed in college life, and I couldn't bring myself to explain why I wasn't joining her. Our conversations became strained and brief, filled with her excitement about classes and dorm mates, while I made vague references to taking time to figure things out. The loneliness was crushing, but it was also clarifying. For the first time in my life, every choice I made was entirely my own. No one else's expectations to meet, no family dynamics to navigate, no predetermined path to follow. It was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. During my breaks at work, I'd sit in the back office reading coding tutorials and business development articles on my laptop. Pete didn't mind as long as I kept up with my responsibilities, and I'd become genuinely good at the job. Regular customers started asking for me, specifically appreciating that I could handle complex transactions quickly and always had accurate change ready. It was during one of these late-night shifts around 2 in the morning on a Tuesday in October that everything changed. A black sedan pulled up to pump number 3, and an elderly man climbed out slowly, moving with the deliberate care of someone whose body had accumulated decades of wear. He was well-dressed but not flashy clean khakis, a button-down shirt, and a navy cardigan that looked expensive but understated. His silver hair was neatly trimmed, and he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd learned to take up exactly the space he needed, and no more. He filled his tank methodically, then walked into the store. Most late-night customers grabbed what they needed quickly and left, but this man browsed the aisles like he had nowhere else to be. He selected a coffee, some crackers, and a bottle of water, then approached my counter. "Working late tonight?" he observed, his voice carrying a slight rasp that suggested both age and wisdom. "Every night," I replied, scanning his items. "Graveyard shift suits me fine." He handed me a $20 bill and gestured toward the coding book I'd left open beside the register. "JavaScript fundamentals. Good choice. Building something interesting." I paused, surprised by both his recognition of the book and his genuine curiosity. "Just learning. Trying to understand how things work under the hood." Self-taught, mostly. Started with library books in high school, moved on to online tutorials. It's just a hobby. He accepted his change but didn't move toward the door. "Mind if I ask what got you interested in programming?" Something about his manner invited honesty. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe it was the loneliness, or maybe it was simply that he seemed genuinely interested in my answer, rather than just making conversation. "I like solving problems," I said, "and I like the idea that you can build something useful from nothing but logic and creativity. Plus, it's one of the few fields where what you can do matters more than where you went to school or who you know." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's a mature perspective for someone your age. Most young programmers get caught up in the flashy stuff at first. The money, the startup culture, the competition. But you're right about the problem-solving aspect. That's where the real satisfaction lives." "You sound like you know the field." A slight smile crossed his face. "I've spent some time in it. Retired now, but I had a good run. Built a few companies, sold them when the time was right. Nothing too exciting, just solid businesses that solved real problems for real people." We talked for another 20 minutes about programming languages, software architecture, and the evolution of technology. His name was Walter Thompson, and despite his modest self-description, it became clear that he possessed a deep understanding of both the technical and business sides of technology development. "I don't suppose you'd be interested in a project," he said as our conversation began to wind down. "I've got an idea for an application that could help small business owners manage their operations more efficiently. Nothing revolutionary, just a better way to handle common tasks. I could use someone with fresh eyes and good instincts to help develop it." I studied his face, looking for signs of the kind of manipulation I'd recently learned to recognize. But Walter's expression was straightforward curious rather than calculating. "I'm not looking for charity," I said carefully. "Good, because I'm not offering any. I'm talking about a legitimate business partnership. You contribute development work and market research. I contribute funding and industry experience. We split the profits based on contribution and sweat equity. Why me? You could hire experienced developers, work with people who have track records." Walter leaned against the counter, considering his answer. "Experience is valuable, but it can also create blind spots. Sometimes you need someone who hasn't learned all the reasons why something won't work. Plus, I like your approach to learning. Self-motivation and curiosity are worth more than credentials in this business." I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, genuine hope mixed with healthy skepticism. What exactly would this partnership involve? "We start small. I cover your basic expenses so you can focus on development instead of survival. We build a minimum viable product, test it with real users, iterate based on feedback. If it works, we scale up. If it doesn't, we learn from the failure and try something else. Either way, you gain real experience building software products." The offer was almost too good to believe, which made me more cautious rather than less. "Can I think about it?" "Absolutely. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." He pulled out a business card and set it on the counter. "My contact information. When you're ready to talk details, give me a call." After he left, I stared at the card for the rest of my shift. Walter Thompson. The card read simply. No fancy title, no corporate logo, just his name and phone number. For the first time since leaving home, I felt like maybe I hadn't made a terrible mistake. Maybe there was a path forward that I couldn't see yet, but that was beginning to reveal itself one conversation at a time. When my shift ended at 6 in the morning, I sat in my car in the gas station parking lot and called Walter's number. "I'm interested," I said when he answered on the second ring. When can we start?" Walter's guest house became my sanctuary and workshop. The small converted garage apartment behind his modest 2-story home included everything I needed: a comfortable bed, a kitchenette, reliable internet, and most importantly, space to think and create without the constant pressure of basic survival. Walter himself proved to be everything his late-night gas station demeanor had suggested and more. A former software engineer who'd founded 3 successful companies over 4 decades, he possessed the rare combination of deep technical knowledge and practical business wisdom. But what impressed me most was his teaching style. He guided rather than directed, asking questions that led me to discoveries instead of simply providing answers. Our application concept was elegantly simple: a comprehensive management tool for small businesses that integrated inventory tracking, customer relationship management, and financial reporting into a single, user-friendly interface. Existing solutions were either too complex for small business owners or too limited to handle their diverse needs. We aimed to fill that gap. I threw myself into the development work with an intensity that surprised even me. 18-hour days became routine as I learned new programming frameworks, studied user interface design principles, and built feature after feature. Walter contributed business strategy, industry connections, and the kind of tactical guidance that only comes from decades of real-world experience. 3 months into our partnership, we had a working beta version ready for testing. Walter had recruited 15 small business owners from various industries: a bakery, an auto repair shop, a boutique clothing store, a landscaping company, and others. Their feedback was overwhelmingly positive. The application solved genuine problems they faced daily, and the interface was intuitive enough that they could use it effectively without extensive training. But while my professional life was ascending rapidly, my family situation continued its spectacular deterioration. Marcus's social media presence had become increasingly erratic. The luxury car photos stopped appearing, replaced by vague posts about pivoting the business model and exploring new opportunities. His supposed business meetings were now always photographed in coffee shops rather than glass office towers. The designer clothes disappeared entirely. Through mutual friends, I learned that Marcus had been desperately trying to maintain his facade, while actual investors began demanding concrete proof of his company's operations. Phone calls requesting office visits went unanswered. Demands for financial statements were met with excuses about confidential information and proprietary processes. The house of cards was collapsing exactly as I'd predicted, but I felt no satisfaction in being right. Only sadness for the waste of it all. My parents' text messages became more frequent and more desperate. They'd stopped trying to convince me to come home and started asking for information about business development, investment strategies, and how to evaluate startup opportunities. I didn't respond, but the subtext was clear. They were beginning to realize they'd been deceived. Meanwhile, our application continued gaining momentum. A technology blogger discovered our beta version through one of Walter's connections and wrote an enthusiastic review that brought us to the attention of serious investors. Within a week, we received inquiries from 3 venture capital firms and 2 established software companies interested in acquisition discussions. "This is happening faster than I expected," Walter admitted as we reviewed the latest round of investor emails. "I thought we'd have at least 6 months to refine the product before attracting this level of attention." I scrolled through those messages, still amazed that people were offering substantial sums of money for something I'd built in my spare bedroom. Is that a problem? Not necessarily, but it means we need to make some strategic decisions sooner than planned. Do we want to take venture funding and scale rapidly? Do we consider acquisition offers? Do we bootstrap growth and maintain complete control? The weight of these decisions felt surreal. Months ago, I'd been sleeping in my car counting quarters to buy gas station hot dogs. Now I was participating in conversations about equity stakes and market valuation. "What do you think?" I asked. Walter leaned back in his chair, studying my expression carefully. "I think you need to understand something important about success in business. It's not about the money, though money is nice. It's about proving that your ideas have value and that you can execute those ideas effectively. Everything else is just scorekeeping." That evening, while reviewing code for our next feature release, I received a phone call from an unknown local number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Augustine?" The voice was my mother's, shaky and uncertain. "Please don't hang up." I said nothing, waiting. "We need to talk. There's been a development with Marcus's business, some legal issues. We think we might have made a mistake." "You think you might have made a mistake?" The words came out flatter than I'd intended. "Can you come home just for dinner? We can explain everything." I looked around Walter's guest house at the whiteboards covered with application diagrams, at the computer screen displaying code that represented genuine value creation. This was home now. This was family now. "I'm busy," I said and hung up. The next morning brought our biggest breakthrough yet. One of the interested software companies made a formal acquisition offer, $3.2 million for our application and intellectual property, with employment contracts for both Walter and me. "Congratulations, Walter said, setting down the offer documents. "You're about to become a millionaire." I stared at the papers, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. In less than 6 months, I'd gone from homeless to wealthy, from abandoned to valued, from powerless to influential. "How do you feel about it?" Walter asked. "Confused," I answered honestly. Happy, grateful, excited, but also confused. A year ago, I thought success meant getting good grades and following the plan my parents had laid out. Now I'm not sure what success means anymore. "That's the right question to be asking," Walter said with approval. "Success without meaning is just expensive emptiness. The question isn't whether you can make money. The question is what you're going to do with the power that money represents." That afternoon, while celebrating with takeout Chinese food and sparkling cider, my phone buzzed with a text message from a number I recognized as my former high school guidance counselor. "Augustine saw an article about a young entrepreneur in town who sounds like you. If that's you, I'm incredibly proud. You always had something special. Hope you're well." The article had appeared in the local business journal. A full-page feature on young entrepreneurs with a photo of Walter and me standing in front of our application dashboard. The headline read, "Local Partnership Creates Breakthrough Small Business Software." My parents would see this article. Marcus would see it. Everyone in my hometown would know that the kid who'd been quietly dismissed as a failure was actually building something significant. For the first time since leaving home, I felt the full weight of vindication. Not because I wanted to hurt anyone, but because I needed to know that my choice had been right. That walking away from a toxic situation, even when it meant risking everything, had been the correct decision. I was no longer the son who disappointed his family by refusing to accept their poor judgment. I was Augustine Thompson Anderson, co-founder of a software company that solved real problems for real people. And tomorrow, I'd be considerably wealthier than the brother who'd stolen my future to fund his lies. But as satisfying as that realization was, it also felt incomplete. Success without connection still felt hollow. I had professional accomplishment and financial security, but the fundamental loneliness that had driven me out of my car and into Walter's orbit remained unresolved. I was winning, but I was winning alone. And I wasn't sure yet whether that was enough. The acquisition meeting took place in a glass-walled conference room 40 floors above downtown, with a view that stretched to the horizon in every direction. 5 executives from Data Flow Solutions sat across from Walter and me discussing terms and timelines with the casual confidence of people who negotiated million-dollar deals regularly. I tried to match their composure while internally marveling at the surreal nature of the situation. The lead negotiator, a woman named Catherine Rodriguez, walked through their offer methodically. $3.2 million for our intellectual property plus employment contracts that would keep us involved in the product's continued development. We're particularly impressed with the user adoption rates you've achieved during beta testing, she explained, consulting her tablet. 93% user retention after 30 days is exceptional for productivity software. That suggests genuine product market fit, not just novelty appeal. Walter fielded most of the technical questions while I focused on understanding the implications of each contract provision. Everything felt legitimate, professional, and overwhelmingly positive. We were building something valuable and sophisticated people were willing to pay handsomely for it. Then my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local entrepreneur faces fraud allegations following investor complaints. I glanced at the headline and felt my stomach drop, even though I'd been expecting this moment for months. Marcus's facade had finally collapsed completely. I managed to maintain focus through the rest of the meeting, but my mind kept drifting to the inevitable chaos erupting back home. By the time we finished negotiations and headed to Walter's car, I had 17 missed calls and dozens of text messages from various family members and hometown acquaintances. "Everything all right?" Walter asked as I scrolled through the notifications. My brother's business just imploded publicly, fraud allegations, angry investors, the whole mess. Walter started the car and pulled out of the parking garage before responding. "How do you feel about that?" "Honestly sad. Not vindicated or satisfied like I thought I'd be. Just sad for everyone involved." We drove in comfortable silence for several minutes before my phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed my father's name. I hesitated, then answered. "Dad?" "Augustine?" His voice sounded hoarse, defeated. "I suppose you've heard." "I saw the news alert. Is Marcus okay?" "Physically, yes. Legally and financially, that's a different question. The police have been here twice today asking about transactions and paperwork. There might be criminal charges." I pulled into Walter's driveway and sat in the car trying to process the conversation I'd imagined having hundreds of times, but never expected to feel so emotionally complex. "I'm sorry this is happening," I said, and meant it. "Are you because you warned us this would happen and we didn't listen? We chose to believe Marcus over you and now everything's falling apart exactly like you predicted." The admission hung in the air between us, heavy with implications neither of us was ready to address directly. "I didn't want to be right about this, Dad. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted Marcus to succeed legitimately, and I wanted you and Mom to be happy with your decision. But we weren't legitimate about it, were we? We took your future and gambled it on something that was never real. And now Marcus is facing potential jail time. We've lost everything we invested, and you..." He paused. You're apparently doing just fine without us. I'm doing well, I corrected gently, but fine is more complicated. Walter caught my eye and gestured toward his house, indicating I should take the conversation inside. I nodded and followed him to the guest house while Dad continued talking. Your mother wants to see you. We both do. We know we don't have the right to ask, but we'd like to explain ourselves and apologize, really apologize, not just try to manage the situation. I'm not ready for that conversation yet, I said honestly. Too much has happened too quickly. I need time to process all of this. I understand, but Augustine, I need you to know that we realize what we did was wrong. Not just financially, but morally. We abandoned you when you needed us most, and we funded something we should have investigated more carefully. There's no excuse for that. And after hanging up, I sat on Walter's couch, staring at the acquisition paperwork spread across his coffee table. In a few hours, I'd officially become a millionaire. My software application was about to be integrated into a platform used by thousands of businesses nationwide. By any conventional measure, I was experiencing remarkable success. But success felt strange when achieved in the shadow of family destruction. Walter emerged from his kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee and settled into his favorite armchair. Complicated day? That's an understatement. This morning I was celebrating the biggest professional achievement of my life. Tonight I'm watching my family implode exactly the way I predicted months ago. I should feel vindicated, but mostly I just feel tired. Vindication is overrated, Walter observed. It doesn't heal relationships or solve underlying problems. It just confirms that you were right about something unfortunate. My phone buzzed with another call. This time Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Augustine, I just saw the Business Journal article online. Are you serious? You're like actually rich now. Her excitement was infectious and uncomplicated in a way I desperately needed. Apparently so. We finalized the acquisition today. This is incredible. I always knew you were brilliant, but I had no idea you were building something like this. Why didn't you tell me what was happening? Why you saw? I explained the basic timeline, leaving home, meeting Walter, developing the application and navigating the family situation that had precipitated everything. Sarah listened with growing amazement and occasional outrage on my behalf. Your parents did what? They stole your college money to fund your brother's fake business. That's insane. It wasn't theft exactly. Legally, it was their money to spend however they wanted. But morally, I trailed off. Morally, it was theft, Sarah finished firmly. And now that his scam has collapsed, they want to reconcile. That's convenient timing. Her righteous anger felt validating but also incomplete. The situation was more nuanced than simple victim and villain narratives allowed for. My parents had made a terrible decision based on poor judgment and favoritism, but they were also facing the consequences of that decision in ways that went far beyond financial loss. I think they're genuinely remorseful, I said, but I also think they're scared about their legal exposure and desperate to repair relationships they damaged when they thought they didn't need them. So what are you going to do? Right now, nothing. I'm going to sign acquisition papers, move into my own place, and figure out what comes next professionally. The family stuff will have to wait until I can think about it without my emotions changing every few minutes. That evening, Walter and I celebrated the acquisition with dinner at his favorite local restaurant. Nothing fancy, just good food and quiet conversation about business strategy and life philosophy. Other diners probably saw an elderly man and his young companion sharing a meal, unaware they were witnessing the conclusion of a partnership that had transformed both our lives. What's next for you? Walter asked over dessert. I'm not sure yet. I've got enough money to be comfortable for a long time, but I can't imagine just retiring at 21. Maybe start another company. Maybe go back to school. Maybe travel and figure out what I actually want from life beyond financial security. All good options. Just remember that success is a tool, not a destination. The question isn't what you can afford to do now. The question is what you want to accomplish with the resources you've acquired. As we drove home, I noticed several missed calls from my parents and one voice message from my mother. I played the message on speaker. Augustine, honey, I know you probably don't want to hear from us right now, but I need you to know something. We saw the article about your business. We're so proud of you and so sorry we weren't there to support your success. I know we made terrible decisions, and I know we have a lot to answer for. But please, when you're ready, give us a chance to make this right. We love you and we miss you and we want to be the parents you deserved all along. Her voice broke near the end, and I could hear Dad talking quietly in the background. Walter parked in his driveway and turned to face me. That sounded genuine. It did. But genuine regret doesn't automatically repair damaged trust. They're sorry now because the consequences of their choices have become clear. But would they be sorry if Marcus's business had actually succeeded? Would they have ever reconsidered their decision if it had worked out financially? Those are fair questions, and you don't have to answer them on anyone's timeline but your own. That night, I lay in bed thinking about the strange mathematics of success and failure. In the span of one day, I'd achieved financial independence and watched my family face potential criminal consequences for their poor judgment. I felt simultaneously vindicated and hollow, accomplished, and alone. Tomorrow, I would be a millionaire, but tonight, I was still just Augustine, a young man who'd lost his family, found a mentor, built something valuable, and had no idea what any of it meant in the larger context of a life well lived. 6 months after the acquisition, my second application launched with the kind of viral success that startup founders dream about but rarely achieve. The new software designed to help freelancers and independent contractors manage their businesses gained 10,000 users in its first week and reached 50,000 by the end of the month. Walter and I had maintained our partnership after the Dataflow acquisition, using the financial foundation from our first success to fund a more ambitious project. This time we retained full ownership and control, having learned enough from our initial experience to navigate the business development process independently. The financial numbers were staggering. Subscription revenue was growing at 30% month over month, with customer acquisition costs remaining remarkably low due to organic word-of-mouth marketing. Conservative projections suggested we'd be generating seven-figure annual revenue within 18 months. More importantly, we were solving genuine problems for people who genuinely needed help. The application streamlined tax preparation, client communication, project management, and payment processing into a single, intuitive platform. User testimonials described how the software had simplified their professional lives and increased their earning potential. But success at this level inevitably attracts attention, especially in a small city where business news travels quickly through interconnected social and professional networks. The magazine article appeared on a Thursday morning in Regional Business Weekly, a publication that covered entrepreneurship and economic development across 3 counties. The cover featured a photograph of Walter and me standing in our new office space with the headline, "Self-Made Young Millionaire Builds Tech Empire from Humble Beginnings." The article detailed our partnership, the development of both applications, and the growing influence of locally based tech entrepreneurship. It mentioned my age, my educational background, and the unconventional path that had led to business success without traditional credentials or family financial support. Most significantly, it included specific details about our revenue projections and my personal net worth information that Walter and I had shared with the reporter during a moment of enthusiasm that we both later regretted. By Friday afternoon, the article had been shared across social media platforms and picked up by the local newspaper. By the weekend, everyone in my hometown knew exactly how successful I'd become and approximately how much money I was generating. The phone calls started immediately. My parents called 17 times on Friday alone. Marcus called from a restricted number. My high school guidance counselor, my former boss at the hardware store, distant relatives I hadn't spoken to in years, and several people claiming to be family friends all suddenly needed to reconnect urgently. I ignored them all, but the pressure was relentless. On Monday morning, I arrived at our office to find my mother sitting in the parking lot beside her car, clearly having been waiting for hours. She looked older than I remembered, worn down by months of stress and uncertainty. "Augustine, please," she called out as I approached the building. "Just 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." I stopped walking but didn't approach her car. "Mom, I'm not ready for this conversation." "When will you be ready?" "It's been almost a year. We've lost everything. Marcus is probably going to prison. Your father and I are talking about divorce. Our family is destroyed, and you're the only one who came out of this situation successfully." "I came out successfully because I left the situation. That's not a coincidence." She climbed out of her car, moving slowly like someone much older than her 52 years. "I know you hate us. I know we deserve that. But we're your parents and we love you, and we need you to understand that we never meant for any of this to happen. Meaning to do something and choosing to do something are different issues, Mom. You meant to support Marcus and dismiss my concerns. The consequences flowing from those choices weren't accidental. So what do we do now? How do we fix this?" I looked at her standing in the parking lot, clearly desperate and clearly sincere, and felt the familiar tug of family loyalty competing with rational self-protection. "I don't know if it can be fixed. Trust isn't something you can rebuild by wanting it badly enough. It requires consistent actions over time, and time is something we can't get back." She started crying, then not manipulatively, but with the exhausted grief of someone who'd lost everything important and was finally confronting the magnitude of her mistakes. "I just want my son back," she whispered. "Which son?" I asked gently. "The one who accepted your decisions without question, or the one who thinks for himself? Because those are two different people, and only one of them still exists." I went inside without waiting for her answer, but spent the rest of the day unable to concentrate on work. Walter found me staring out the window around 3 in the afternoon. "Productive day?" he asked with knowing sympathy. "Family ambush in the parking lot. My mother drove here to plead for reconciliation." "How did that go?" "Exactly as badly as you'd expect. She wants the relationship we had before everything went wrong, but that relationship was built on me accepting whatever they decided was best. I can't go back to being that person, and I'm not sure she can accept who I've become. Change is hard for everyone, but it's especially hard for parents. They spend 20 years thinking of you as their child, then suddenly you're an autonomous adult with your own power and resources. That's a difficult adjustment even under good circumstances." That evening, I returned to my condo to find Marcus waiting by my front door. He looked dramatically different from the last time I'd seen him, thinner, obviously exhausted, wearing clothes that actually belonged to him rather than expensive rentals. The cocky confidence that had defined his personality had been replaced by something quieter and more uncertain. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he said as I approached, "but I need to tell you something, and I need to tell you in person." I unlocked my door but didn't invite him inside. 5 minutes. "You were right about everything. The business was fake, the investors were real, and I was in way over my head from the beginning. I convinced myself that if I could just maintain the illusion long enough, I'd figure out how to make it real. But it was never real, and I knew that from day one." "Okay. I manipulated Mom and Dad into giving me your college money. I showed them fake financial projections, fake client testimonials, fake everything. I told them you were too immature to appreciate the opportunity you'd have to be part of something important. I made them believe that taking your money was actually good for you. The admission hung between us like a physical presence." "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because they still don't understand how completely I lied to them. They think they made an honest mistake based on incomplete information. But it wasn't incomplete information. It was deliberately false information that I created specifically to convince them to choose me over you. And you want me to tell them that?" "I want you to know that none of this was their idea. It was mine. They were stupid and gullible and unfair to you, but they weren't malicious. I was malicious. Everything that happened started with me lying and manipulating and stealing from my own family. I studied his face, looking for signs of the calculating charm that had defined him for as long as I could remember. But whatever I saw there seemed genuine exhaustion, regret, and something that might have been actual humility. "What do you want from me, Marcus, "Nothing. I don't deserve anything from you, and I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted you to know the truth before I disappear completely." "Disappear? I'm probably going to prison. Even if I don't, I can't stay here. Everyone knows what I did, and I can't rebuild any kind of life in a place where my reputation is completely destroyed, so I'm leaving. Tonight, probably. I just wanted to clear the record first." He turned to walk away, then stopped and looked back. "For what it's worth, Augustine, I always knew you were the better son. Smarter, more honest, more capable. That's why I worked so hard to convince everyone otherwise. I was scared of being compared to you directly, so I made sure the comparisons never happened." After he left, I sat in my living room thinking about responsibility, manipulation, and the complex ways that families damage each other. Marcus's confession changed some things and explained others, but it didn't resolve the fundamental question of how to move forward with parents who'd chosen poorly when choosing mattered most. My phone buzzed with a text message from a number I didn't recognize. "Augustine, this is Walter's cardiologist. He asked me to contact you. Please call me immediately." Everything else suddenly felt much less important. Walter's funeral took place on a gray Tuesday morning in March with a spring rain that seemed designed for farewells. The service was held at a small church he'd attended irregularly, but supported generously, and the gathered mourners represented a cross-section of his long, productive life. Former business partners, employees from his various companies, neighbors who'd known him for decades, and a surprising number of young entrepreneurs he'd mentored over the years, all came to pay their respects. I sat in the front row feeling simultaneously honored to be there and overwhelmed by the responsibility of organizing the service for someone who'd become more father than friend. Walter's heart attack had been sudden, but not entirely unexpected. His cardiologist had warned us about increasing risks associated with his age and medical history, but Walter had continued living fully right up until the end. His last project had been reviewing business plans for a scholarship fund designed to help young people start companies without traditional venture capital. As the minister spoke about Walter's generosity, wisdom, and quiet influence on countless lives, I found myself thinking about legacy and meaning in ways I'd never considered before. Walter had achieved financial success, but more importantly, he'd used that success to create value for others. His companies had solved real problems, employed good people, and generated genuine prosperity for everyone involved. I was still processing these thoughts when I noticed familiar figures entering the church during the closing hymn. My parents had arrived dressed appropriately but clearly uncomfortable about intruding on such a personal moment. They waited until the service ended and most attendees had moved to their cars before approaching me in the church parking lot. Dad looked older and more fragile than I remembered, while Mom carried herself with the tentative posture of someone unsure of her welcome. "Augustine," Dad said quietly, "we wanted to pay our respects. We know how important Walter was to you." "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely meaning it despite my complicated feelings about their presence. "We read about what happened," Mom added. "The heart attack. We know you've been handling his affairs and organizing everything. That can't be easy." "It's not, but it's important work. Walter didn't have family locally, so someone needed to take care of details." We stood in awkward silence for a moment, surrounded by the dispersing crowd of mourners, until Dad cleared his throat. We'd like to talk if you're willing, not here obviously, but soon. There are things we need to say and things we need to understand." "This isn't the right time or place," I said firmly. "We understand, but Augustine, we can't keep living in this limbo forever. We've lost one son already, and we can't bear the thought of losing you too." "You didn't lose Marcus. You enabled him until his lies caught up with him. And you didn't lose me. You chose to prioritize him over me, and I chose not to accept that dynamic anymore. Mom started crying again, the same exhausted tears I'd seen in our parking lot confrontation months earlier. We made terrible mistakes. We know that now, but we're still your parents, and we still love you. Love isn't enough, I said, hearing the words come out harsher than I'd intended. Love without respect, trust, and fairness isn't actually love, it's just attachment. Before either of them could respond, another familiar figure appeared across the parking lot. Marcus approached slowly, looking even more worn down than during our last conversation. He'd lost more weight, and his clothes suggested someone living on a very limited budget. "Marcus," Dad said with surprise, "what are you doing here?" "I came to pay my respects to the man who gave Augustine the opportunities I stole from him," Marcus replied simply. The four of us stood in a rough circle, 3 generations of family dysfunction playing out in a church parking lot, while other mourners drove away to resume their normal lives. "I told Augustine the truth about what I did," Marcus continued, addressing our parents directly. "How I manipulated you both into choosing me over him. How I created false evidence to support my lies. How everything that happened was ultimately my responsibility, not yours." Dad's face went pale. "What are you talking about?" "The business projections were fake. The investor testimonials were fake. The financial statements were fake. Everything I showed you was designed specifically to convince you that giving me Augustine's college money was a smart investment rather than theft." Mom sat down hard on a nearby bench, as if her legs had suddenly stopped working. "You mean you knew it was all lies from the beginning?" "I knew it was all lies because I created all the lies. You didn't make an honest mistake based on incomplete information. You made a decision based on deliberately false information that I provided specifically to manipulate you." The silence that followed was heavy with implications none of us had been prepared to confront directly. "So what you're saying," Dad said slowly, "is that we destroyed our relationship with Augustine, not because of poor judgment, but because we were victims of fraud perpetrated by our other son." "That's exactly what I'm saying. Augustine tried to warn you, but I was more convincing because I had more practice lying and more motivation to maintain the deception." I watched my parents process this information, seeing their understanding of the past year shift in real time. Their guilt was being redistributed, but not eliminated. They'd still chosen to believe Marcus over me, still failed to investigate his claims thoroughly, still dismissed my concerns without serious consideration. "Where does this leave us?" Mom asked, looking directly at me. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "Marcus's confession changes some things, but it doesn't change the fundamental dynamic. When you had to choose between your children, you chose him. When I presented evidence that he was lying, you dismissed it. When I left, rather than enable your poor decision, you blamed me for being dramatic rather than reconsidering your choice." "But if we'd known of the full extent of his deception," Dad began. "If you'd known the full extent, you might have chosen differently, but you should have investigated more thoroughly before making any choice. You should have listened to my concerns more carefully. You should have considered the impact on my future more seriously. Marcus's manipulation doesn't excuse your failure to be better parents." Marcus stepped closer to our family circle. "Augustine, I know I don't have the right to ask you for anything, but I need you to consider forgiving them. Not for their sake and not for mine, for your sake. Carrying this anger is going to poison your success and make you cynical about relationships in general." "I'm not angry anymore," I said, realizing it was true as I spoke the words. "I was angry for months, but anger requires too much energy to sustain indefinitely. Now I'm just cautious. I don't trust easily, and I don't invest emotionally in people who've proven they'll abandon me when convenient." "But we never wanted to abandon you," Mom protested. "Intent matters less than impact. You abandoned me whether you meant to or not. And when I pointed out that you were abandoning me, you told me to be proud of supporting the family instead of reconsidering your decision." The conversation might have continued indefinitely, but I was emotionally exhausted, and needed space to process Walter's death without the added complexity of family drama. "I need to go," I said, "and there are legal matters to handle related to Walter's estate, and I can't deal with both things simultaneously." "When can we talk again?" Dad asked. "I don't know. Maybe never. Maybe eventually. Right now I need to focus on honoring Walter's memory and figuring out what I want to do with the rest of my life." I walked away from Sim toward my car feeling simultaneously relieved and empty. The confrontation I'd been dreading for months had finally happened, but resolution felt as distant as ever. As I drove toward Walter's house to continue sorting through his personal effects, I thought about the different kinds of family relationships Walter had taught me to recognize. Some families were biological accidents that created more pain than support. Other families were chosen communities built around shared values and mutual respect. Walter had been my chosen family for the past year. Now I needed to decide whether to build new chosen family relationships or attempt to repair the biological ones I'd left behind. For the first time since leaving home, I had both the resources and the emotional clarity to choose my own path forward, whatever that path might be. 2 years after Walter's funeral, I stood in the main conference room of what had once been his house, now converted into the Thompson Entrepreneurship Center. The space buzzed with the focused energy of 12 young entrepreneurs working on their startup ideas, guided by volunteer mentors who'd achieved success in various industries. My business empire had grown beyond anything Walter and I had originally envisioned. 3 successful applications generated steady revenue streams that provided financial independence for life. But more importantly, the work had evolved into something meaningful, creating opportunities for people whose circumstances had limited their traditional options. The scholarship foundation I'd established in Walter's memory had helped 63 students attend college whose families couldn't afford tuition. The mentorship program had guided 47 young entrepreneurs through the early stages of business development. And the incubator space provided resources for anyone with good ideas, but limited access to capital or professional networks. Sarah knocked on my office door around 4 in the afternoon carrying coffee and wearing the satisfied expression of someone who'd just finished a challenging medical school exam. "How did the pediatric rotation go?" I asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Better than expected. I think I might actually know what I'm doing." She settled into the chair across from my desk. "What about you? How was the mentor session with Jennifer?" Jennifer was our newest entrepreneur, a 22-year-old whose family had rejected her business ideas in favor of pressuring her to marry young and abandon her professional ambitions. Her story paralleled mine in enough ways to make mentoring her feel personally significant. Promising. She's got solid instincts for market research and a genuine solution to a real problem. Her family situation is complicated, but she's handling it with impressive maturity. "Speaking of complicated family situations," Sarah said carefully, "your mom called me yesterday." I set down my coffee cup and studied her expression. "About what?" "She wanted to know if I thought you'd be willing to meet with them. Apparently, they've been in family therapy for 6 months working on understanding their patterns of favoritism and manipulation. She said they realize they can't undo their mistakes, but they want to try building a different kind of relationship if you're open to it." This wasn't the first time my parents had attempted indirect contact through mutual connections, but it was the first time the outreach had included mention of professional help and genuine self-reflection. What did you tell her?" "I told her that I'd pass along the message, but that any decision was entirely yours. I also told her that you've built a good life and you're not waiting around for them to fix things. If they want a relationship with you, they need to accept that it would be on your terms, not theirs." I walked to the window overlooking the center's main workspace. Jennifer was deep in conversation with her mentor, a successful marketing consultant who'd volunteered her time to help young entrepreneurs avoid common strategic mistakes. Their collaboration reminded me of my early sessions with Walter, when every conversation opened new possibilities I hadn't known existed. "I ran into Marcus last week," I said, turning back to Sarah. "Did I mention that?" "No, where?" Coffee shop downtown. He's working construction now, living in a small apartment across town. Looks healthier than the last time I saw him, more grounded. We talked for a few minutes. How was that? Surprisingly normal. He apologized again, but not in the desperate way he used to, more like someone who's accepted responsibility and moved on. He's dating a nurse, apparently. Someone who doesn't know anything about his business failures and likes him for who he is now rather than who he used to pretend to be. Are you considering rebuilding that relationship? Maybe. It's different with Marcus than with my parents. He was the one who created the original problem, but he's also been the most honest about what actually happened. And he's proven he can change his behavior rather than just feeling guilty about it. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. What about your parents? I don't know. Part of me wants to believe they've genuinely learned from their mistakes. But another part of me worries that they're just trying a different strategy to get the same result, a relationship where I accommodate their emotional needs without them having to fully acknowledge the damage they caused. You could always meet with them once and see what they've actually learned. If they're genuinely different, you'll know. If they're not, you'll know that too. That evening, I sat in Walter's study, now my home office, reviewing applications for the next round of scholarship recipients. The stories were heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Students whose families couldn't afford college, whose circumstances had limited their educational opportunities, whose potential was obvious, but whose resources were inadequate. Each application reminded me of my own 18-year-old self sitting in my car at a truck stop trying to figure out how to build a future from nothing. The difference was that these students wouldn't have to figure it out alone. My phone rang around 8 o'clock. Marcus's name appeared on the caller ID. Hey, I answered. Hey yourself, are you busy to? Just reviewing scholarship applications. What's up? I wanted to give you a heads up about something. Mom and Dad are planning to come to the Entrepreneurship Center's open house next month. They wanted to support what you're doing publicly, show the community that they're proud of your success. Did they ask you to call me about this? No, they don't know I'm calling. But I thought you should know in advance so you can decide how you want to handle it. I leaned back in Walter's old chair, considering the implications of my parents attending a public event celebrating work they'd had no part in supporting. What do you think about them coming? I asked. Honestly, I think they're trying to rewrite history a little bit. Show up now that you're successful and respected so they can be associated with your achievements. But I also think they're genuinely proud and genuinely sorry. And they don't know any other way to express that. And you think I should let them come. I think you should do whatever feels right to you. You don't owe them access to your success, but you also don't have to punish them forever. They're flawed people who made terrible decisions, but they're not evil people who intended to hurt you. After hanging up, I walked through the center's quiet workspace thinking about forgiveness, family, and the different kinds of success Walter had taught me to recognize. Financial achievement was satisfying but temporary. Professional recognition was gratifying but ultimately external. But building something that helped other people overcome circumstances similar to your own, that felt like the kind of success that created lasting meaning. I thought about the question I'd ask people if they were in my situation. Would reconnecting with my parents enhance my ability to help others? Or would it distract from that work? Would setting boundaries with them model healthy relationship dynamics for the young entrepreneurs I mentored, or would accepting their presence, after years of absence, send the wrong message about self-respect and consequences? The answers weren't clear, but the framework felt right. Every major decision should be evaluated based on whether it supported or undermined my ability to do meaningful work in the world. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Thank you for believing in my business idea when my family wouldn't. Working with you has shown me what supportive relationships actually look like. I hope someday I can pay it forward the way you're paying forward what Walter gave you. Reading her message, I realized something Walter had tried to teach me, but I'd been too young to fully understand. The best revenge against people who underestimate you isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming so focused on helping others that their opinion becomes irrelevant to your sense of purpose. I picked up my phone and typed a message to my parents. I heard you want to attend the open house next month. You're welcome to come. But I want you to understand that if you do come, you'll be witnessing the life I built after leaving the situation you created. I'm not going to pretend that your absence didn't matter, and I'm not going to celebrate your presence now as if your support was always there. But if you can accept those conditions, then I'd be willing to talk afterward. I sent the message before I could reconsider, then returned to the scholarship applications spread across my desk. One application particularly caught my attention, a 19-year-old whose parents had refused to support her college plans because they disapproved of her career goals. Her essay was eloquent and determined, describing how she'd worked multiple jobs while maintaining excellent grades, how she'd researched universities and degree programs independently, and how she planned to use her education to start a nonprofit organization serving her community. I approved her application immediately and made a note to arrange a mentorship meeting. Stories like hers reminded me why Walter's investment in my future had been so transformative and why continuing that legacy felt more important than resolving old family conflicts. Success, I'd learned, wasn't about winning arguments with people who'd underestimated you. It was about creating enough value in the world that their validation became unnecessary for your sense of accomplishment. Some families support your dreams from the beginning. Others learn to celebrate your achievements after you've proven your worth independently. And some never learn at all. But the right response to family dysfunction isn't bitterness or isolation. It's building the kind of supportive community you wished you'd had from the start, then opening that community to others who need what you needed when everything seemed impossible. Walter had given me more than business mentorship or financial opportunity. He'd shown me what unconditional support looked like, what it felt like to have someone believe in your potential without needing proof of your worth first. Now it was my turn to be that person for someone else. Have you ever had to choose between maintaining difficult family relationships and protecting your own emotional well-being? How did you find the balance between forgiveness and healthy boundaries? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more stories about overcoming adversity and finding success on your own terms. And if you know someone who's dealing with unsupportive family dynamics or trying to build something meaningful from difficult circumstances, please share this story with them. Sometimes knowing that others have walked a similar path can make all the difference. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family that matters most is often the one you choose for yourself, built around shared values and genuine support. That's the kind of legacy worth creating, and that's the kind of success that truly lasts.